Day 10 at 11 Days of Remembrance. Chapter 10 The Transition. I could hardly wait for the summer of 1947 to pass. I had just enrolled my senior graduation at rehab school. I had been accepted to study at University College at the University of Toronto and had also been confirmed as the resident member of the main residence on campus at 73 Street, George Street. George Street. The, the summer of 1947 was a summer of regularly good weather, and it was a very exciting time for Canadians as well. The country was bustling engaged in the process of adjusting from the discipline and the focused, single-minded nation effort to win the war to a less structured, more diverse, and relaxed civil iron economy. Consumer goods such as automobiles, clothing, and refrigerators, though still in short supply, began to appear in dealers' stores across the nation. Food and gasoline rations appeared, and restricted items such as sugar and butter became available in the grocery stores. Ration cards were no longer necessary. Factories that had produced every kind of war material, from tanks and bombers to naval 5-inch shells, were slowly changing over and becoming to produce refrigerators, vacuum cleaners, electric stoves, and a wide variety of consumer hardware. It had been a long war with many shortages for Canadian civilians. There was an enormous pent-up demand for an upsurge of consumer goods. It was an exciting time for another reason. By now, all of Canada's armed forces had returned from the far corners of the earth and were utterly trying to return to old jobs and new opportunities for employment to the post-war Canadian economy. It was also an exciting time because during the war, Canadians had accomplished things that no one before the war had dreamed we were capable of. Canadians were bursting with pride and unchanging had hopes, dreams, and high expectations for themselves and our country. We were no longer the unburdened, largely virtual producers of natural resources as the rent materials and lumber somewhere in the wilderness in North America above the 49th parallel. Now Canada was on the map, a real player in the world of commerce, and had a strong and ability voice in international politics. Lester Pearson and his Canadian colleagues in external affairs were helping to shape the United Nations in the post-war world. This was big league stuff. We had earned a place at the table of international affairs. We were now at a new generation to our economy. We had a bursting manufacturing sector and a growing big steel industry to support it. The sky was the limit, and foreign strategy, Winston Churchill agreed with us that the 20th century truly belonged to Canada. In the middle of his hastily and brutal optimism, the future, I was free and had nearly $3,000 paid back in the bank and was going to realize my dream of going to university. Somehow, I have survived the battles, the slave labor, and the prison camps, and now my life stretched before me. to do with what I would and want I could, but things were not quite so simple or quite so easy as they appeared to the surface. Yes, it was that. I was home, physically free, and my health was beginning to improve, but I was as free or untroubled as I might have appeared on the surface. I found I could not forget what happened in the last 4 years, and I expect to not forget the fact of my comrades and who had not returned from Hong Kong and Japan. The memories continued to disturb and trouble me. On several occasions I was asked to visit the mothers and fathers of those in my company of our regiment who had not returned. After these visits I would become deeply depressed. One such visit was to the mother of Sergeant David Lim, who had died of starvation and embryonic dysentery in captivity of POW of Hong Kong in the spring of 1942. During the war, David's father had passed away, and now Miss Lim had alone, having lost both her husband and her only son. Miss Lim was grief-stricken and could not bring herself to believe that her only son was dead and buried thousands of miles away somewhere in a foreign land in alien soil. She refused to accept the Army's report of his death, and it was concerning, and I had known Sergeant Lim. I was asked to go and see her. One beautiful June day, I went to London to visit Miss Lim in her little suburban home. While David Lim had not been in my company, we became friends as POWs. Miss Lim was very grateful that I had come to see her and confronted in me that she could not believe her handsome young son was dead. I tried to convince her that he had died in North Point prison camp and that I had attended his funeral. I tried to console her. It was a terrible experience for both of us. I had never seen such grief. It was through these sorrow meetings that I began to understand these awful conditions of war, and to feel deeply to the sore of my being the suffering of the mothers and fathers, the brothers, sisters, the wives, and the sweethearts who had lost the brothers and lost the loved one. I was deeply depressed after the meeting with Miss Lund. Having survived the battle, I had no answer as to why David had to die. The memory of the sad meeting was a vision of sorrow, pity that it surrounded me, and ran on memory to this day. During the years that followed, I have never shook off the sad memories of the past, and very suddenly I have, through a day in the last 60 years, entirely free of the tragedy of Hong Kong and the ceaseless deaths of so many of those young men. Again and again I have lived through the horror of the 4 years in my dreams. These dreams present even to this day. They seem to always the same. In my dreams I learned that we prisoners in Japan will never be allowed to go free to see our families in Canada again. Even though the war is over, we will remain forever in Japan as slave laborers and prisoners of the Japanese. I try to forget by avoiding anything to do with the Hong Kong Veterans Association, and while at the time I thought it would help, it probably didn't. There was really no one I could talk to except my wife, and I tried to avoid humbling her, so I was alone with my inner feelings. It was decades before I began to realize that I had felt a deep, seated, unconditional feeling of guilt. because so many had died, and I had lived, and so far longer I had cared to admit my joy, wife, and children in my career was married by those awful feelings at my survival and my good fortune. Finally, I decided it would be a good thing for the children and the grandchildren of my Hong Kong comrades and my own children if I wrote an eyewitness account to record, just as I saw it, what happened in December 1941 at the Hong Kong so long ago. I wanted to recall for all Canadians and for preserving the little known and almost completely forgotten story of the courage and loyalty of that small force of Canadians who had faced with their moment of truth, never never failed the country or each other, and never surrendered to the enemy. Only when I began to write and once again to contact and talk to my surviving veterans, colleagues from Hong Kong, did I begin to realize from the depression and feelings of guilt that had plagued me for so long. I learned that while he had each other reacted in different ways, none of us had escaped the emotional burden of our experience in the Far East. And these decisions, it was coming to learn that I was not alone. At least the great day in September 1947 came. It was time to say goodbye to my railway construction crew friends, and to take the train to Toronto and my new home at 73 St. George Street, and to prepare for commitment day at University College. I was given a comfortable room overlooking the campus at the university's men's residence, and soon attended in the academic atmosphere of the venerable old mansion that had seen so many generations of eager young students come and go. I learned we were to eat our meals in the main hall at Hart House at a special table reserved for the members of 73 St. George Street. I was living in style at the campus, surrounded by scholarship students. It's just what I had hoped for. There were 30 male students at 73 St. George Street, and I often think back to the wonderful times we had together. Of course, the freshmen at age 19 were in all of an old man like who at age 25 had served nearly 7 years in the Canadian Army in World War II, and who had from time to time was interviewed to take tea with John Russell and his wife. The first week after commencement was the time for the inauguration ceremonies of the freshmen. It had become a long-standing tradition at the residence that the seniors put the freshmen through a series of medley, sadistic, painful, and very humiliating introduction exercises that had lasted about a week. The president of the House called for a general meeting on the day after supper of all House members. He announced the names, including mine, of the freshman victims of the House who were to appear the following night at 8 o'clock for the first integration rituals the back campus. After he was finished, I rose and said, Mr. President, while I understand the House tradition of introducing freshmen, there will be one freshman who will not be present tomorrow, even at 8 o'clock, on the back campus, and that person will be me. You see, gentlemen, I have already been initiated in a posting barracks in London, Ontario in 1940, and my integration lasted not 1 week but 9 months under the circumstances. I think you will agree that I have already undergone my initiation, and because of that, I think you will also agree I should not be required to go through another. My comments were regarded as a motion from the floor, which was debated, put to a vote, and decided in my favor. Writing Commander Campbell was granted the same exception. I loved the university and everything about it. I was elected president of my first year class of 1947-48. At University College, this position entitled me to sit on the University Students' Council, and as a member, I became involved in university politics. The president of the university at the time was Sidney Smith. It was a long time before the president, who other members of the council in the credit office, arguing the case to allow the communist Red Dean, Pilot of Cranberry, England, to speak to the student body. This was great fun and no doubt a big pain to President Smith. After several meetings with him, he reserved his decision to borrow the Red Dean and agreed to allow the student council to extend invitation to come to Toronto at their own expense and to avoid the virtual students and convention held. None of us were converted to communism. In the first week after conversation, I had the greatest stroke of luck of my entire life, when I met the person who was to become my wife, my wonderful partner, and my best friend for life. A friend of mine named Bill Stewart from Guelph invited me to join him at a great dance series for freshmen at University College when by the student council. When we got to the dance, it was crowded with young people and the freshman year, attending the first social event at the university. It didn't take us long to become aware of an especially beautiful young woman who, with a female friend, was surrounded by a group of young men. Eventually, we elbowed our way through to the foundation. I was interesting smitten. She was beautiful and glowed with an aurora of warmth and goodness that I found deeply attractive. However, she wasn't a freshman. She was a lecturer in the Department of Sociology and was an MA graduate from McMaster University. She was 21 and had been born in Burma, where her father was a famous Baptist missionary. Her name was Margaret Telford, and from the moment on, I began to plot a way to change her last name to McDowell. However, I was not alone in my intent. There was another young man with exactly the same idea. At one point, when she barely knew of me, I handed in to my professor a review of a book on Japan written by Margaret Mead, the famous American amorphologist. At the time, I didn't know Margaret was his assistant responsible for checking our papers. When I book review returned, it was graded with a B. I regretted it. A B as in effort was not an authority on Japan. After all, I had lived there for 4 years. How dare they give me a B? In the next spare period, I went to the professor's office to complain. His secretary said he was out, but I could speak to his assistant, Miss Margaret Turford, and about my marks. I went to Margaret's office to be greeted with her smile and her question if she could help. Holding my paper, I said, I come to see my grade on this Margaret Mead book report. My paper was graded B, and I do not get Bs. I wanted to know who graded this paper a B and why. Margaret looked at me and calmly said, well, Mr. McDowell, I marked your paper and I graded a B, and as far as I'm concerned, it will stay a B. But with another smile, she said, I am pleased you take your work and your marks so seriously. I am pleased you seriously, and I will take up your complaint with the professor. At her words and her smile, the wind of enthusiasm died in my sails. As I crept out of the building, I cursed myself as a fool for such a silly, self-righteous speech in front of the beautiful, sensitive girl. I learned after we were married that, true to her word, she did go see the professor and told him that because she was becoming emotionally involved with a student named George McDowell, she preferred not to grade any more of his work. I plunged into my studies and reveled in the world of ideas I found at the university. I quickly made friends with my veteran classmates, and we had a wonderful time together as we described how to save the world. As I look back on that period, I remember that not only we were very idealistic, but we were convinced that the big government was the solution to society's problem, and we were very anxious to take part in the creation of a better world. We had been imprisoned by what the wartime government of Canada had been able to accomplish. We saw how Canadian Army and others ruled from the top because of a powerful discipline and efficient of Canadian Parliament and our foreign policy. We realized that if criticized in power had few departments loyalty could defeat Germany and Japan, we could easily solve any of our current social problems, such as poverty, illiteracy, unemployment, and as an ex-serviceman and woman, we decided to have to be concerned of a society of socialized medicine as we had been living under a highly organized and very efficient form of military socialized medicine in the service for years. Realized that was a vast difference between a military government and a free, democratic civilian society. We understood that there was no place in post-time Canada for totalitarianism, but we nevertheless felt strongly that big government could be an answer to our social problems. At the time, as today, there was little support for conservative our ideas at the university and our zeal for social reform and to make Canada and the world a better place, more humane place. Many of us became what today would be called left-wingers. We decided the famous pivot report, which was to become of the foundation of British socialist movement, and were deeply impressed by its socialist blueprint for a better society. Have become interested in a supportive government built and civilized social housing project for the city's poor and underprivileged. While at the university, I was working as a graduate student, assisting to Professor Alan Rose of the School of Social Work. Dr. Rose was a pioneer in social housing, and his work in was finally led to the creation of the post-war Alexander Park housing project and others in downtown Toronto. At that time full of goodwill and enthusiasm for social housing, we did not foresee that there's a negative consequences of these publicly funded housing projects and the crime and social stigma that seem to foster in their residents. Our sense of social justice and our disdain for socialism or social reform often blinded us to the difference between how people actually behave and how we thought they should behave. We were no doubt well-meaning but naive. We had seen what a mess the world was in, and we were in a hurry to change it for the better. This was the problems in the Kang Coal Room bar across the street at the Park Plaza, in the classrooms, in the men's residence, and the dining table at the art house. I gained my BA in 2 years, and wearing a cap and gown and accompanied by my fiancée, Margaret Tarford, received my Bachelor of Arts certificate one beautiful June day at Christmas Hall. My classmates, yes, this hard-working tortoise getting straight as, oh, what a day it was. In little more than 3 years, I graduated from high school and had a BA. What a wonderful opportunity my country had provided for me and my veteran friends. Now it was on to graduate school to attain my MA. That summer, I took a summer job as the guardian of the grandchildren of Mrs. W. L. Matthews at her summer estate at Rhodes Point on Lake Sequoia. Her son was the Canadian ambassador to Washington, and Miss Matthews had agreed to look after her 4 grandchildren for the summer. I was asked by the warden of Hart House to apply for the job, as he had been asked by Miss Matthews to recommend a student. I didn't want the job, but agreed as a favor to him to be interviewed by Miss Matthews. I went to her mansion in Forest Hill and was asked about my slavery. I quoted a figure I knew was far too high. When I voiced my slavery recollections, she paused and asked me to repeat my slavery terms, as if she couldn't believe her ears. When I replied to them without blushing, she smiled and said, "Agreed. Suddenly my chauffeur will pick you up things tomorrow, and you can move in here until the children arrive from Washington next week." The next thing I knew, I was out on the street with a summer job at a wonderful salary I had never experienced to get. I couldn't go back and admit I was a fraud, and so the very next day, chaff fine by Sydney, I went to live in Miss Matthews' house, not as a servant, she told me, but as the guardian of her grandchildren. That meant I had all my meals with her and her children, and I was kind of a father subject for the summer. The Roaches Point summer house was another mansion, beautifully situated on a land facing Lake Sequoia. There were 3 servants, a cook, and 2 maids. Suddenly the chauffeur and a gardener. My word was law as far as the safety of the children was concerned at Rosa's point, and I never let those kids out of my sight or out of my mind for even a moment. When my first payday came, Miss Matthews told me she was saving my salary until the end of my employment period, when it would be paid in full. In the meantime, she said, giving me an envelope full of cash, "This is your expense money." Expense money, I said. We didn't discuss expense money. Expensively, she said. Well, I must have forgotten to mention it, but while you're here, you will be receiving expense money every week. That was the end of the discussion. Again, Lady Luck dealt me a luck break. I could save my entire summer earnings, but that wasn't the only benefit I was so he. Miss Matthew was a widow, and the sisters of Sir William Monk, the world-famous physician. She was immediately wealthy, highly educated, and a simply wonderful human being. After dinner, uh, and after the children were tucked into bed, Miss Matthew and I would sit together on the vast veranda and talk. Rather, she would talk and I would listen. What an experience for me to listen to her life story, to hear of her travels and the people she had met, and the experiences of the gifted women. When she was a girl, her father invested in Sir Winston Churchill to stay with them when he was on a speaking tour of North America. She had her father threw Winston a stuffed shirt because he always insisted on dressing for dinner. She thought he was wonderful. Was a personal friend of Lester Pearson and those who of that period with an odd couple, the native original 25-year-old soldier student and the wealthy culture enter Miss Matthews with a wonderful education for me. For her birthday, I gave her a copy of a biography of Joseph Stalin. She asked why Joseph Stalin, and she laughed when I replied, I gave you that book because, as far as I can see, he's the only famous person you don't know. Uh, After my 16 weeks were up, we said goodbyes, our friendship continued, and over the subsequent years, she invested Margaret and me and our children to her home many times until she passed away. In September of that year, Margaret and I were married, and we went to live in attic on Swimming Road, just north of St. Clair Avenue. The attic had a bedroom, a sitting room, and a bathroom, but no kitchen, so we set up two hot plates on orange crates in the hallway and washed our dishes in the bathtub. Margaret got a job. Assistant to Dr. Footy, the famous town planner, was earning her $100 per month. As a Latin student, I earned $60, and so we had bonus of $160 per month. We were poor, but so we all of families, and we were very happy. We lacked for nothing and looked forward to the day we could buy a house, have children. I did well at graduate school. Hard work was the education for recognition, and because I was serious about work, I got to know outstanding professors and fellow academics, Dr. Albert Rose, Clark, Dr. Hart, and Professor Biden, the author of the Canada-U.S. Auto Pact. The influence on me was enormous. My wife Margaret was an academic star and was of a great help during this period as well. One day the phone rang in the attic. The caller asked me if my name was G.S. McDowell. When I replied that yes, indeed, I was, her next question was, and are you the author of an article of Trina Cotton of Merchant Labor Commission programs? Again, the answer was yes, I am. By now, I began to feel somewhat apprehensive about what was coming next, as the point said to my somewhat hefty Southern caller, "Do you mind telling me why you are asking these questions?" She replied, "Well, apparently your paper had something to say about Canadian General Electric, and I have been asked by Mr. H. M. Turner, the president of CGE, to call you to make an appointment to see him here at head office, 212 King Street, West, next Wednesday morning at 9 o'clock." I noticed she didn't ask me if I was agreeable to the meeting. She said I had issued a summons. Then it struck me like a ton of bricks. My heart sank. I had written and handed in a term paper to my professor of labor relations a contract analysis of 2 years of contracts of CGC and the United Electrical Workers Union papers. The percent of communications were the same people. The workers of CGG and my analysis were conclusively pointed out. Consistently, I thought to my professor and my paper was losing the propaganda war for the support of its employee by a country mile, and what the Communist UEW Union newspaper was winning it. I was not entirely distrust of CGG organization's failures, but front quotation professor who laughed and reviewed me with an A, but now I thought, what have I done? Had I communicated liable? Did I need a lawyer to defend me? Who had leaked the paper? Had I communicated the university? I headed for my professor's office to ask him how my paper had come to the hands of the president of CGE. He confessed that he, in fact, given the paper to Mr. Turner as he thought it would be good for him. He didn't tell me that he had been close friends for years, and that Turner was a big contributor to the university. I was certainly opposed when my appointment with CGE president came due. I saw no good coming home from this meeting. When I was ushered into his office, he asked me to sit down and tossed my papers across the desk to me. "Did you write this paper?" he asked. "Yes, sir," I replied. "Do you believe what you wrote?" "Yes, sir," I gulped. "So do I," he said. "Unfortunately, what you said about our communication program is all too true. Well, you could have knocked me over with a feather. What I thought was going to be serious tongue lashing and maybe a removal of my government scholarship turned out to be my first offer of a job." "But, sir," I said, "I won't finish my M.A. for nearly 2 years at the earliest." "Oh," he said, "I fixed that with the regular at the university. You can get your M.A. by working for me in the morning." and going to school in the afternoon until you have earned the needed credits for your degree. What should I do at CGE? I asked. He said, I go to work in the industrial relations department of the company starting next week morning. Now he said you will start off with $40 per week. $40 a week, I gasped in surprise. Then he paused and then said, all right, damn it, $50 a week. By this time, I was in shock. $50 a week? I remember getting up, shaking his outstretched hand, and mumbling that thank you or something, and straight off into King Street to catch the streetcar home to tell Margaret that we're rich. No more attics with kitchen. We had just gone from a salary of $15 a week to $50 a week, and a job with one of Canada's best-known large companies to boot, and all over a term paper. Hallelujah. Apparently my luck as a civilian was to take a turn for the better. As so, with General Electric, I began a business career that lasted for 32 years, until my retirement on January 1st, 1990. I stayed with Canada Electric for the first 20 years and subsequently held a series of executive positions in other companies. I retired in 1981. A few months after my retirement, I joined the Government of Ontario in July 1982 on a 6-month contract in the Table Division, the Ministry of Trade and Technology under Deputy Minister Lucky Bragg, as he was highly a civil surgeon. He came to the Queen's Park to Ontario, what a time our minister was the forcing but energetic Gordon Walker from London, Ontario. Osborne was a strong support of my idea, and government Premier Bill Davis appointed me Deputy Minister of that ministry, as a mission was to promote trade, increase exports to foreign markets, and encourage industrial development. Enjoyable my life in this position, I had the opportunity to know and serve under 3 Premiers of Ontario, 3 ministers, including Premiers Davis, Peterson, and Miller, and Ministers Walker, Bennett, and O'Neill. One of the important goals of our ministry during the period was to double Ontario's export sales from $30 billion to $60 billion annually. I served in the Government of Ontario for 5 years, and within I retired, Ontario companies' export sales reached $61 billion in that year, set tens of thousands of new jobs in 1990. I retired again, this time for good. The year 2002 will mark 61st anniversary of the Battle of Hong Kong. As I look back on the personal bias, I have no regrets, but this situation was the same today in our country, and our way of life were threatened as they were in 1939. I would volunteer to go through it all again. I hope one soldier's story will contribute to an understanding of what happened at Hong Kong in the Japanese prison camps, and will be lasting tribute to the character of the men of the Royal Rifles and the Winnipeg Grenadiers who fought for the Canada so far away and so long ago. I believe that if those were who failed to return from Hong Kong in Japanese prison camps, and those who gave their lives could speak to us today, they would agree that if we cherish our freedom, we must have the courage to defend it. Unfortunately, as the events of September 11, 2001 arrest, the world is not yet free of those who do not share our respect, our ideas, our values, and still a dangerous place, especially for the unprepared and the unruly. I hope, therefore, that as well as a recurring of the unbreakable spirit and sacrifice of the Canadians of Hong Kong, much of the story will also be a reminder, especially to the young people of Canada, if we wish to enjoy our freedom in this wonderful country of ours, we must always be prepared to defend it. That's the ending of chapter 10 and the ending of day 10 of 11 Days of Remembrance. The next video will be the 11th day. I'll do that on the 11th of November. At the ceremonies, I'll be in London, England. And I'd like to say thank you to the veterans who fought for me to be free in World War I and World War II. And I thank them for, if they did not do this, I would not be able to make these videos. So, thank you. And I hope you enjoyed these chapters. The next video you'll see will be me at the Remembrance Day ceremonies in London, England. I'll be there in the morning. It will end at 11:11 a.m. and this marks 99 years of the holiday. And yeah.